Last week, Pastor Seth drew us into one of the most famous books in the Bible, the book of Job, a book that asks big questions of God and of this life. And goodness knows, in a world where church sanctuaries and synagogues no longer feel safe, we have big questions. And last week we talked about the workings of our world, which existed on three planes: on the physical and material, which is the earthquakes and illnesses; on the moral and legal, which is crime and punishment; and on the spiritual or faith-filled, where we ask God, where are you in the midst of pain? And who are we as people of faith called to be? But the book of Job, like so many stories that we tell ourselves, is almost a trite tale, where any suffering that Job experienced seems to be erased in this passage. As his good fortune returns and is multiplied after his trial, where his livestock and money pour forth, where his children who have died are replaced with other children, and where God blesses Job for the rest of the days of his life, and he seems to live happily ever after, and it seems to get better.
A reading from the book of Job. Job answered God, "I am convinced you can do anything and everything. Nothing and no one can upset your plans. You asked, who is this muddying the water, ignorantly confusing the issue, second-guessing my purposes? I admit it, I was the one. I babbled on about things far beyond me, made small talk about wonders way over my head. You told me, listen, let me do the talking. Let me ask the questions. You give the answers. I admit I once lived by rumors of you. Now I have it all firsthand, from my own eyes and ears. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'll never do that again, I promise. I'll never again live on crusts of hearsay, crumbs of rumor." After Job had interceded for his friends, God restored his fortune and then doubled it. All his brothers and sisters and friends came to his house and celebrated. They told him how sorry they were and consoled him for all the trouble God had brought him. Each of them brought generous housewarming gifts. God blessed Job's later life even more than his earlier life. He ended up with 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 teams of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named the first daughter Dove, the second Cinnamon, and the third Dark Eyes. There was not a woman in that country as beautiful as Job's daughters. Their father treated them as equals with their brothers, providing the same inheritance. Job lived another 140 years, living to see his children and grandchildren, 4 generations of them. Then he died, an old man, a full life. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Amen.
Would you please pray with me? Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be glorified in your sight, for you, O God, are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. When I was a little girl, my mother, in all of her feminist glory, did not want me to grow up with false ideals about body image, about perfection and societal expectation for my life. This resulted in what I currently term Barbiegate. See, my mother refused to buy me any of the classic children's toy, with their feet permanently contorted for shoes that just seemed too dangerously high, and a waist, hip, bust proportion that would have left Barbie in a wheelchair if she needed to get around in any physical human way. I could buy my own Barbies now if I saved my allowance, or I could have a Barbie if I was given it as a gift, although Santa always seemed to lose those requests in the mail. Instead, though, my mother bought me a real Barbie. She had flat feet and a little bit of a tummy and thighs, and she had brown hair not too dissimilar from my own. And I hated this doll, which upon reflection maybe says a little something about me. She often lived in the bottom of my toy box, ignored and forgotten. Then, moving as little ones do from infatuation to infatuation, I became engrossed with life under the sea and longed to be part of that world, with Ariel and her sidekick Flipper and that crusty crustacean Sebastian. My mother also insisted that I should know the truth about classic literature. So while my friend Sarah Beth had a VHS where Ariel and Eric lived happily ever, the newly married couple literally sailing off into the sunset, I sobbed as the sea witch gives Ariel an ultimatum. Since Prince Eric does not end up loving Ariel but another, Ariel must either cut out his heart and throw it into the sea or turn into sea foam. As the sun rises and Ariel casts her dagger into the sea, unable to kill her love, the princess is no more and forevermore turned into sea foam. A cheery pick-me-up tale for children everywhere. Thank you, Hans Christian Andersen, but I'll stick with the Disney classic on that one. We long for the fake. We long for the fake, and we want the happily ever after, the it'll be okays and the it gets betters. And it feels like that's what we're getting here at the end of Job. The happily ever after, Job's suffering begetting his salvation. This meets our modern ideals. If we think positively enough, if we pray enough, if we have enough faith, then we're rewarded with abundance that we cannot even imagine. And we're immune to the suffering of this world, right? In her book, Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, Duke Divinity professor Kate Bowler writes about her academic study of the prosperity gospel. This belief that the righteous will be rewarded while the wicked will suffer. She writes, I did discover that the prosperity gospel encourages people, especially its leaders, to buy private jets and million-dollar homes as evidence of God's love. I just like to note that Seth and I are obviously not ministers of the prosperity gospel. But she goes on to write, but I also saw the desire for escape. Believers wanted to escape from poverty, from failing health, and the feeling that their lives were leaky buckets. Some people wanted Bentleys, but really more people wanted relief from the wounds of their past and the pain of their present. People wanted salvation from bleak medical diagnosis. They wanted God to rescue them from their misfiring marriages. They wanted talismans to ward off the things that go bump in the night. They wanted a modicum of power over the things that ripped their lives apart. We crave the certainty of the story. The predictable pattern of Joseph Campbell's hero's arc, where we go through trials and tribulations, but return victorious, reborn, and transformed. There's something comforting in controlling our stories and our lives so that they meet this narrative. Like some great formula, if only we can keep score and know where we stand, we want to tell ourselves that story. Any story, so that we can get some certainty back. And we sometimes believe these lies that end up breaking our hearts. For Kate, this desire for a modicum of power and control, this formula, this story, became all too real when she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Throughout the book, she wrestles with what it will mean to leave her little 2-year-old boy and her high school sweetheart husband. She writes of years where she failed to love what was present and instead loved what was possible in her life, striving for the next best thing instead of realizing that maybe the best thing was already surrounding her. Last week, Pastor Seth preached on the preceding passage to this one from Job, where God asks Job, "Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth, giving life to every living thing?" This refrain is one used hauntingly in the 2011 movie Tree of Life. But it is a question that God not only asks of Job, it is a question that we time and again find ourselves crying out to God. Where were you? As families at the Tree of Life synagogue gathered to celebrate life with a brisk, life was cut short. Where were you? And this week we are left with the empty and the hollow. I was a little surprised last week when Pastor Seth was mentioning all the contemporary writings on Job that he did not mention one of my favorites, because I would assume it would be one of his as well, the Coen brothers' film, A Serious Man, a contemporary portrait of Job, or as he's known in the film, Larry, who is met with the trials of this life. Larry has a wife who no longer loves him and wants to leave him. Larry's job as a physics professor is in dangerous peril after a student's unfounded complaint. And Larry suffers from a constant health concern that leaves him every night lancing the boil on the back of his neck. And in his attempt to find meaning and comfort and guidance, Larry attempts to gather wisdom from 3 different rabbis. The first rabbi, a young man fresh out of rabbinical school, points out his office window after listening to Larry. He points out his office window at a parking lot, and he tells this trite answer, claiming God is in all things, from the banality of this parking lot to Larry's life. And all we have to do is find God, the divine, in the driveway. Not comforted, though, Larry seeks a second opinion. The second rabbi Larry goes to tells him a story of God in the miraculous and in the magical, of God leaving a message, letting a man know that he is not alone. Still, Larry is not comforted, for God has never appeared to him in any sort of divine message. There's been no burning bush or angels to wrestle with or voices from on high. And so he goes to a third rabbi, an old, distinguished rabbi who is just not there. The secretary tells Larry to come back. He's busy. The overall feeling that this response is not only reflective of this rabbi, but of God, God's self. Come back, I'm busy. But this old distinguished rabbi is also the one helping Larry's son along the process to his bar mitzvah. And in class one day, Danny, Larry's son, gets into trouble listening to a radio headset when he should be studying scripture. The headset is confiscated, and he expects never to see it again. Now, in some Jewish traditions, right around the time of bat mitzvah, young men and women will go to see the rabbi for some word of wisdom that they will hold with them for the rest of their life. As Danny walks into the rabbi's office, he sees laid out on his desk that radio headset. And as he steps forward, the rabbi, an archetype of Jewish wisdom with his long beard and tiny circular glasses that are perched on the edge of his nose, and his back hunched from years of studying scripture, the rabbi begins to speak in a dry voice. When the truth is found to be lies, and the joy within you dies, tears are running down. They're all running down your dress, and your friends, baby, they treat you like the rest. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Won't you find somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. The rabbi's wisdom, the wisdom of Job and the Jefferson airplane, that the heartache and life will come, but we can find somebody to love, and we need somebody to love. This is the story of the gospel, after all, where God enters into the brokenness of humanity for a short time. But in that time, love was unbound, transformed and igniting the world. As Jesus taught us to love without boundaries or restrictions, with disregard for labels and conventions, to love in a way which honors our shared humanity. Father Robert Barron says it well. If God is love, the best way to communicate with God and participate in that which is God is to find somebody to love. After meeting with doctors, clinical trials, tests, and heaps of hope, Kate, our author and Duke Divinity School professor, was told that she would die within the year. And drawing those that she loved close around her, she writes about this conversation with her friend Frank. I asked him about heaven. He knew what I was asking because he always knows. Will I be connected? Will I miss everything? Will I see my son sprout up and learn the rules of Canadian football? Can I see him graduate and launch into the world? How many times can I sit by his bed as he squints his eyes and folds his hands and thanks God for sticks and trucks? These are the plans that I have made. These are the hopes that are being ground into dust. And then one day, out of the blue, I remember what Frank said next. Don't skip to the end, he said gently. Don't skip to the end. Plans are made, plans come apart, new delights or tragedies pop up in their place, and nothing human or divine will map out this life that has been more painful than we could ever imagine and more beautiful than we could ever imagine. So let us not skip to the end, searching for the happily ever after, and let us hold on to the wisdom of Jefferson airplane and the gospel and its greatest commandment. And may we find somebody to love and realize that the real, raw, broken is also beautiful and true and honest. And maybe that is better than any happily ever after. Amen.
Precious Lord.